A poor girl with a baby in the cold begs a young billionaire for help. We were kicked out of our home. Can you let us sleep at your house for just one night? What happens next is unbelievable. The blizzard had been raging violently for hours, making the landscape around Jasper's mansion almost unrecognizable. The thick flakes fell in a furious rhythm, piling up on the branches of the trees and turning the driveway into a white, impassable surface. The wind howled through the tall pine trees that surrounded the property, as if nature itself were protesting against the intense cold of that night. Jasper was sitting in his favorite armchair in the library, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his right hand and an open book in his lap. The fire crackled in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the book-lined walls. This was how he spent most of his nights, alone in silence, exactly as he preferred. He had chosen this secluded mountain mansion precisely for its distance from the world. No neighbors for miles, no unexpected visitors, no social obligations, just him, his books, and the comforting silence that had become his only companion over the years. When the first knock sounded on the front door, Jasper almost ignored them. No one would knock on his door on a night like this. It must have been just a branch broken by the wind, or some animal seeking shelter. The knocks came again, louder this time, more urgent, and he frowned, annoyed by the interruption. He placed the book and the glass on the side table and reluctantly stood up. The knocking continued, now at an almost desperate pace. Whoever was outside seemed determined to be heard. The hallway leading to the main entrance was long and dark, lit only by a few wall lamps that cast a yellowish glow on the wooden floor. Jasper's footsteps echoed as he walked, his irritation growing with each knock on the door. "I'm coming," he said, not hiding the annoyance in his voice. When he finally opened the heavy door, the icy wind burst into the entryway like a living creature, bringing with it a gust of snow that immediately spread across the polished floor. Jasper had to squint against the wind and, for a moment, he saw no one. Then his gaze lowered, and he found her. Standing on the doorstep was a little girl, no more than 6 years old. Her pale face was red from the cold, her slightly bluish lips trembling uncontrollably. She wore a coat far too thin for the temperature, and snow was accumulating on her faded beanie and slender shoulders. But what caught Jasper's attention the most was what she carried in her arms, a baby wrapped in a blanket so thin it seemed almost an offense against the brutal cold of the night. Before Jasper could say anything, the girl lifted her face to him, her large, dark eyes shining with a mixture of fear and determination. "We were kicked out of our home," she said, her small voice struggling against the wind. "Can you let us sleep at your house for just one night?" The desperate frankness of the request caught Jasper by surprise. It wasn't a plea for a handout or an elaborate lie. It was a scared child, holding a baby, asking for the bare minimum anyone could offer, temporary shelter from the storm. Jasper was paralyzed for a moment, his brain struggling to process the unexpected situation. Part of him, the part that had grown accustomed to solitude, that had chosen isolation, wanted to simply close the door and return to his armchair, his book, his whiskey, and his silence. But another part, one he thought he had buried long ago, couldn't ignore 2 children standing in the snow, shivering from the cold with nowhere to go. "Where did you come from?" he asked, his voice harsher than he intended. "Where are your parents?" The girl clutched the baby tighter to her chest, as if fearing he might be snatched from her at any moment. There was something in the way she positioned herself, protective and vigilant, that seemed out of place in someone so young. "Please," she insisted, ignoring his questions. "Just for tonight. It's too cold out here." A particularly strong gust of wind emphasized her words, making the baby stir in her arms. Jasper looked past the children into the near-complete darkness of the snow-covered forest. The storm was getting worse by the minute. No decent human being would leave children outside on a night like this. Reluctantly, he made a curt gesture with his hand, allowing them to enter. "One night," he said, his tone firm, setting boundaries immediately. "Just until the storm passes." The relief on the little girl's face was instant and so genuine that Jasper had to look away. She entered quickly, her soaked sneakers leaving small puddles on the entrance rug. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice now a little calmer. "My name is Sloane, and this is Rowan. He's 10 months old." Jasper gave a brief nod, closing the door against the storm. He didn't offer his own name in return. He saw no need for introductions for something so temporary. "Come on," he said, guiding her down the hall. "I'll take you to the living room. There's a fire going in there." Sloane followed him in silence, her steps almost inaudible compared to his. Every few steps, she adjusted the baby in her arms, an automatic movement of someone used to carrying that weight. The living room was large, with 2 big dark leather sofas arranged in front of a stone fireplace, where the fire still burned vigorously. It was a beautiful room, but impersonal. No photographs on the walls, none of the small touches that usually make a house a home. "How you can put your brother on the sofa," Jasper said, hesitating slightly before deciding how to refer to the baby. Sloane nodded and, with almost reverent care, settled Rowan on the sofa closest to the fireplace. The baby stirred slightly, making a small sound of contentment as he felt the warmth. She unwrapped the thin blanket to reveal a worn-out onesie, too big for his small body. "Are you hungry?" Jasper asked, keeping a safe distance, his arms crossed as if trying to create a physical barrier between himself and the children. "Yes," Sloane replied, but her eyes never left her brother, watchful even now that they were safe inside. "Wait here," Jasper said, turning to leave. "I'll get something for you to eat." In the kitchen, Jasper took a deep breath, leaning his hands on the marble countertop. What was he doing? Letting 2 unknown children into his house in the middle of the night. It was madness. It was exactly the kind of complication he had sworn to avoid when he moved to this isolated place. But what else could he have done? Let them freeze outside. Even he wasn't that heartless. He opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents as if expecting to find answers there. He took out milk, cheese, some fruit, and bread. He didn't know what a 10-month-old baby ate, but he supposed the sister would. When he returned to the living room, he found Sloane sitting on the floor beside the sofa, still in her wet coat, holding the tiny hand of her brother, who was now sleeping peacefully. The scene was strangely moving, a child taking care of another, both alone in a world that was too big for them. "You should take off that wet coat," he said, placing the tray of food on the coffee table. Sloane hesitated, as if not wanting to move away from her brother, but eventually obeyed. Underneath the coat, she wore a simple t-shirt, too big for her, with a faded print that Jasper couldn't make out. Her arms were thin, with smudges of dirt that spoke of days without a proper bath. "How did you get here?" he asked, watching as she took a piece of bread and ate it slowly, as if trying to make the food last as long as possible. "Walking," she answered simply after swallowing. "I saw the lights of your house from far away. Walking in the snow. With a baby." The disbelief was evident in his voice. Sloane just shrugged, a surprisingly adult gesture for someone so small. "We needed a place to stay." "You said you were kicked out of your home," Jasper continued, trying to understand the situation. "What happened?" Sloane's eyes met his for a moment, assessing, calculating how much she could or should say. Then they returned to the bread in her hands. "The people we were staying with didn't want us anymore," she said, her voice now lower. "They said we couldn't stay there." There was something in her vague answer that made Jasper uncomfortable. Relatives? Legal guardians? Or something more sinister? Who would send 2 children out into the street on a stormy night? "And where were you going?" "I don't know," Sloane admitted, and for the first time, Jasper saw the vulnerability behind the brave facade she maintained. "Just walking, looking for a place." Silence once again filled the room, broken only by the soft crackling of the fire and the rhythmic breathing of the sleeping baby. Jasper didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to talking to children, let alone dealing with situations like this. "Is there anything the baby can eat?" Sloane asked, looking at the tray. "I don't know what babies eat," Jasper admitted, feeling strangely inadequate. "Rowan likes mashed banana," she said, picking up one of the fruits. "Can I mash it for him?" Jasper nodded and watched as she, with surprising skill for someone so young, peeled the banana and mashed it with her fingers onto a small plate. There was something unsettling about the naturalness with which she cared for her brother, as if she had been forced to take on responsibilities far beyond her age. "Do you live alone in this big house?" Sloane asked, breaking the silence as she finished preparing the baby's food. "Yes," Jasper replied curtly, without elaborating. "Don't you get sad?" The question, so direct and innocent, caught Jasper off guard. He felt a surge of irritation. Who was this child to question his life choices? "No," he answered, more coldly than he intended. "I prefer it this way." Sloane looked at him with curiosity, but didn't press the matter. She turned her attention back to her brother, adjusting the blanket around him with almost maternal care. Jasper watched her, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the children's presence in his house. They were like intruders in his carefully ordered world, reminders of a life he had chosen to leave behind. The weight of the responsibility they represented was already beginning to make itself felt, even if it was just for one night. "You can use the bathroom at the end of the hall if you need to," he said, pointing the way. "There are clean towels in the closet." Sloane nodded gratefully but made no move to get up. Her eyes were heavy with sleep, but she seemed to be fighting to keep them open, as if afraid something might happen if she drifted off. "I'll get some blankets," Jasper said abruptly, needing to get out of that room, out of that situation, if only for a few minutes. In the guest room, as he grabbed extra blankets from the closet, Jasper tried to convince himself he was doing the right thing. It was just one night. In the morning, the children would be gone, and he would return to his routine, to his chosen solitude. Maybe he could take them to town, hand them over to the proper authorities. It wasn't his problem. It couldn't be. When he returned with the blankets, he found Sloane already asleep, curled up on the floor next to the sofa where her brother slept, one of her hands still holding his, as if even in sleep she needed to make sure he was okay. Jasper hesitated, the blankets in his arms. Something about the scene, the absolute vulnerability of those two children, the way one protected the other even in sleep, touched something inside him, something he thought he had buried long ago. He approached silently and carefully covered Sloane, making sure the blanket enveloped her completely. He did the same for the baby, checking to see if he was warm enough. For a moment, he stood there watching the two sleeping figures so small and fragile against the big, cruel world. Who were they? Where did they come from? What had happened to make them end up knocking on his door on a stormy night? And, more importantly, what would he do with them in the morning? Jasper stepped back, the weight of the silence now different, laden with unanswered questions. He left the room, turning off all the lights except for a small lamp in the corner, in case one of the children woke up disoriented during the night. As he walked down the hall toward his room, something inside him already knew that nothing would be so simple. These children had disturbed the carefully constructed piece of his existence, and though he couldn't admit it yet, they had also found a crack in the wall he had built around his heart. He closed his bedroom door, convinced that, by morning, everything would be resolved. He would return to his routine, to his chosen solitude, and these children would be just a fleeting memory, a brief detour in his meticulously planned existence. But as he lay down, the sound of the wind howling outside seemed to carry a warning. Some storms change everything forever. The first rays of sun crept shyly through the cracks in the curtains when Sloane opened her eyes. For a moment, she lay completely still, confused by the unfamiliar ceiling above her. It wasn't the leaky roof of the abandoned house, nor the open sky that had so often been her only cover. It was a high, white-painted ceiling with an elegant chandelier she had never seen before. Then the memories of the previous night came flooding back. The long walk in the snow, the growing desperation, the lights of the mansion shining in the distance like a beacon, the serious-faced man who had opened the door. Sloane sat up with a start, her heart racing. She immediately looked at the sofa where Rowan was sleeping, wrapped in the soft blanket that was much better than anything they had used in recent months. Her little brother was breathing peacefully, his cheeks rosy and his small lips slightly parted. The room was silent. The fire in the fireplace had dwindled to a few orange embers, but the room was still pleasantly warm. Through the window, she could see that the snow had stopped falling, and a weak sun was trying to establish itself in the clear sky. It was time to leave. The man, Jasper, She had heard him introduce himself on the phone the night before. Surely didn't want them there any longer. They had already overstayed their welcome. Sloane stood up silently, carefully folded the blanket, and placed it over the arm of the sofa. She was arranging her few belongings in her small, tattered backpack when she heard footsteps approaching. She immediately tensed, her shoulders stiff with apprehension. Part of her expected to be kicked out at any moment, even though she knew the man hadn't been rude the night before. Jasper appeared at the living room doorway, already dressed in dark jeans and a navy blue sweater. He had a cup of coffee in his hand and the same serious expression as the day before. His eyes moved from Sloane to Rowan, then to the half-open backpack. "Good morning," he said, his voice neutral, without any inflection that might reveal his thoughts. "Good morning, sir," Sloane replied, her fingers tightening on the backpack strap. "We're leaving now. Thank you for letting us stay." Jasper frowned, observing the small figure before him. There was something uncomfortably familiar in the way she seemed ready to flee at the slightest sign of a threat. "You haven't had breakfast?" he said finally. "There's food in the kitchen." It wasn't exactly an invitation to stay, but it wasn't an order to leave either. Sloane hesitated, undecided. She looked at Rowan, still sleeping, and then back at Jasper. "Okay," she replied softly. "I'll wake Rowan up." Jasper nodded and turned, walking toward the kitchen. Sloane took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. A few more minutes, just enough time to eat something and feed Rowan. Then they would leave, before things got complicated. Gently, she woke her brother, who slowly opened his eyes, blinking a few times before smiling at the sight of his sister's familiar face. Despite everything they had been through, Rowan was a cheerful baby. Sloane picked him up, settling him in her arms with the dexterity of someone who had been doing it for a long time. In the kitchen, Jasper had already set out bread, milk, cereal, and some fruit on the table. He was sitting in one of the chairs, watching as Sloane entered carrying Rowan. "You can sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Sloane settled Rowan on her lap and poured herself some milk. The silence hung between them, heavy and filled with unasked questions. Jasper drank his coffee slowly, his eyes occasionally fixating on the children, as if trying to solve a particularly difficult puzzle. "Where did you come from?" he finally asked, his tone dry but not hostile. Sloane chewed a piece of bread slowly, buying time. Her eyes met Jasper's for a brief moment before returning to her plate. "We used to live with our mum," she replied, her voice so low that Jasper had to lean in to hear, "in a small house on the east side of town." "And where is your mother now?" The question, though expected, made Sloane press her lips together for a moment. Her fingers mechanically adjusted Rowan's shirt, a gesture that seemed more to comfort herself than the baby. "She died," she said simply, the words coming out as if they cost a great effort. 3 months ago." Jasper hadn't expected such a direct answer. He felt a tightness in his chest, an uncomfortable sensation he couldn't name. He tried to keep his expression neutral, but something in his eyes softened. "I'm sorry," he said, and he truly was. "And your father?" Sloane shrugged, a gesture that seemed too heavy for her small shoulders. "I never knew him. Mom said he left before I was born." Jasper nodded, absorbing the information. 2 orphaned children, alone. The image evoked memories he preferred to keep buried. "And where did you stay after your mother passed away?" Sloane hesitated, her eyes fixed on Rowan, who was happily playing with a spoon. Jasper realized she was choosing her words, deciding how much she could reveal. "We stayed in our house for a while," she began, her voice low. "I tried to do everything the way Mom did. I took care of Rowan, did the laundry. There was a little food in the cupboard." There was something deeply disturbing in the naturalness with which she described taking on responsibilities so far beyond her age. Jasper felt irritation grow, not directed at her, but at the situation, at a world that allowed children to be abandoned this way. "But then some people came," Sloane continued. "They said the house wasn't ours anymore, that we had to leave. You were evicted." The disbelief in Jasper's voice was clear. "And no one helped. Was there no social assistance, no relatives, no neighbors?" Sloane shook her head. "Mom didn't have any family. and she always said that if anything happened to her, they would separate us. They'd take Rowan to one place and me to another. Her eyes met Jasper's, now with surprising determination. I promised her I would take care of him, that we would never be separated. Jasper looked away, bothered by the intensity of those childish eyes that had already seen too much. Where did you go after the eviction? We hid in an old house by the river, Sloane explained, now helping Rowan drink some milk. Nobody lived there. It was falling apart, but there was a dry corner where I set up some old blankets. We stayed there until the day before yesterday. What happened the day before yesterday? Some men showed up. They said they were going to tear the house down, that we couldn't stay there. She paused, her eyes momentarily lost in the memory. It started to snow hard, and we just started walking. I didn't know where to go. Then I saw the lights of your house. Jasper tried to imagine the scene. A little girl carrying a baby, walking in the snow with no destination. The thought made something inside him contract painfully. He tried not to show anything, to maintain the distant posture he had built over the years, but inside, something was already beginning to change, a crack in a wall he had deemed impenetrable. It was then that he noticed something that had escaped his attention. Rowan, who had been calmly playing with the spoon, now seemed restless. His breathing was faster than normal, and his cheeks, previously rosy, now seemed excessively red. "Is he okay?" he asked, gesturing toward the baby. Sloane looked at her brother, concern immediately visible on her face. She touched his forehead with the back of her hand, a surprisingly maternal gesture. "He's a little warm," she admitted, but quickly added, "But it'll pass. He gets like this sometimes when it's cold." Jasper wasn't convinced. He moved closer and, with some hesitation, touched the baby's forehead. He was burning up. "He has a fever," he said, now genuinely worried. "A high one." "It'll pass," Sloane insisted, but her voice betrayed her own unease. "He got like this once at the old house, too. I gave him water and he got better." Jasper watched Rowan more closely. Besides the fever, his breathing was definitely faster than normal, and there was a slight wheeze each time he inhaled. The baby didn't seem to be in pain, but he was definitely not well. Fear began to grow inside Jasper. He knew nothing about babies, about what was normal or not, about how to care for someone so small and fragile. What if it was serious? What if it got worse? The responsibility seemed too great, too heavy for someone who had spent so long living only for himself. "Oh, he needs to see a doctor," he said finally, his decision made. "No!" Sloane exclaimed, suddenly alarmed. "They'll ask questions. They'll want to know where our mum is, why we're alone. They'll separate us." The desperation in her voice was palpable. Jasper hesitated, understanding her fear, but the baby's health was more important at that moment. "Sloane, look at me," he said, kneeling to be at her level. "Your brother needs a doctor. He has a high fever and he's not breathing right. This could be serious. But I won't let them separate you," Jasper promised, surprising himself with his own words. "I'll say I'm a relative, that I'm looking after you temporarily. They don't need to know more than that." Sloane stared at him, her big eyes searching for any sign that she could trust him. After a moment that felt like an eternity, she slowly nodded. "Okay," she agreed, her voice small. "But do you really promise? Promise they won't take Rowan?" "I promise," Jasper said, and he realized he meant it. He didn't know how, but he wouldn't allow these children to be separated. 20 minutes later, they were in Jasper's car on the way to the hospital. He had found a winter coat in his closet, far too big for Sloane, but better than hers. Rowan was wrapped in clean blankets, his little face flushed with fever, resting on his sister's shoulder. Jasper drove in silence, trying to convince himself he was doing this only out of a sense of responsibility. After all, any decent person would do the same. He couldn't just ignore a sick child. It was the least that was expected of a human being. But as he watched Sloane in the rearview mirror, whispering words of comfort to her brother, he felt that crack inside him widen a little more. At the hospital, they were seen quickly. Jasper introduced himself as the children's uncle, explaining that he was temporarily caring for them. The doctor, a middle-aged man with a kind expression, didn't question the story. He was more concerned with Rowan's condition. After examining the baby thoroughly, he confirmed what Jasper already feared: a respiratory infection aggravated by exposure to the cold and, most worryingly, signs of malnutrition. He needs antibiotics, the doctor explained, while writing a prescription, and much better nutrition. In fact, both children do. Jasper nodded, feeling a weight of guilt, although he rationally knew he wasn't responsible for the children's situation. "Is he going to be okay?" he asked, surprised by the concern in his own voice. "With the proper treatment, yes," the doctor replied. "He's young and, despite everything, seems to be a strong child. But he needs constant care over the next few weeks. Good food, a warm environment, regular medication." Weeks. The word echoed in Jasper's mind. It was no longer a matter of one night, of sheltering the children during a storm. It was a much bigger commitment. Part of him wanted to back away, to say he couldn't, that he wasn't prepared for this. It was then that he felt something small and warm take his hand. He looked down and saw Sloane's delicate fingers intertwined with his. She was looking at him with a mixture of fear and hope, as if he were her only anchor in a world that had only shown her abandonment. "Thank you," she whispered, "for helping us." And in that moment, something inside Jasper completely gave way. The wall he had built around his heart, the isolation he had chosen as a way of life, all of it suddenly seemed fragile in the face of those grateful, childish eyes. "We're going to take care of him," Jasper said, gently squeezing Sloane's hand. "We're going to take care of both of you." The doctor prescribed antibiotics and other medications, along with a detailed list of care and feeding instructions. Jasper listened attentively, asking questions, making sure he understood exactly what Rowan needed. At the pharmacy, in addition to the medications, he bought special baby food, diapers, some basic clothes, and even a small teddy bear that caught his eye on the shelf. Sloane watched everything with wide eyes, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. When they finally returned to the mansion, it was almost noon. Rowan was sleeping in Sloane's arms, exhausted from the fever and the trip to the hospital. Jasper opened the front door, carrying the shopping bags, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was truly coming home, not just to a house. As he helped Sloane settle Rowan on the sofa, he realized he no longer wanted to pretend he didn't care. The truth wasn't he cared a lot. These children, with their whispered stories and silent courage, had found a way into his heart. And now that they were there, he wasn't sure he ever wanted them to leave. The days passed slowly as Rowan recovered. The fever broke on the third day, and the wheezing in his breath disappeared after a full week of antibiotics. The baby's cheeks, once pale, gained a healthy color, and his appetite improved considerably. Jasper observed these changes with a relief he couldn't completely disguise. Every morning, the first thing he did was check if the baby had slept well, though he tried to convince himself it was just responsibility, nothing more. On a clear afternoon, while Rowan slept on the living room sofa and Sloane drew quietly on a piece of paper he had given her, Jasper made a decision. He grabbed his car keys and his coat. "I'm going to town," he announced, stopping at the living room door. "I need to buy a few things. Will you be okay with Rowan for an hour?" Sloane nodded, her large eyes watching him with a mix of trust and apprehension that still unsettled him. "Yes," she replied simply. "He's sleeping soundly now." Jasper hesitated, one foot already outside. "If he wakes up, there's milk in the fridge. And if you need anything—" "I know," Sloane said, with a maturity that painfully contrasted with her age. "I'll take care of him." In the small-town supermarket, 20 minutes from his house, Jasper pushed the cart through the aisles with determination. He put in fresh fruit, vegetables, meat, milk, cereal. Then, almost without realizing it, he found himself in the baby products section. He looked at the shelves filled with items he knew very little about. With some hesitation, he began to put diapers in what he thought was the right size, wet wipes, baby powder, and diaper rash cream into the cart. An employee, noticing his lost expression, approached to help. "First child?" she asked with a friendly smile. Jasper almost corrected the mistake, but something stopped him. "Yes," he replied, the lie slipping easily from his lips. A boy. 10 months. The woman smiled even wider and began suggesting essential items. Jasper listened attentively, grateful for the help, though a part of him wondered what he was doing. These children weren't his. They shouldn't be with him. Eventually, they would have to go somewhere more suitable, with people who knew how to truly care for them. But as he went through the checkout, paying for everything, he knew he was just lying to himself. The truth was that in just a few days, Sloane and Rowan had become a part of his life in a way he couldn't explain, even to himself. On the way back, he passed a small toy store. He stopped the car almost without thinking and went inside. He came out 15 minutes later with a package containing a colorful rattle for Rowan and an illustrated storybook for Sloane. When he got home, he found Sloane sitting in the same spot, but now with Rowan awake in her lap. The baby smiled when he saw Jasper, a toothless grin that lit up his round face and made something inside Jasper contract. "I brought some things," he said, trying to sound casual as he carried the bags inside. Sloane followed him to the kitchen. Rowan balanced on her hip with the experience of someone who had been doing it for a long time. Her eyes widened when she saw the number of bags. "Is all this for us?" she asked, her voice low with surprise. "Well, you need to eat properly," Jasper replied, avoiding looking directly at her as he put away the groceries. "And Rowan needs clean diapers and other things." When he finished putting the food away, he handed Sloane the bags with the clothes and toys. She received them as if they were made of crystal, her small fingers holding the hangers with reverence. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked with an emotion she seemed to be trying to contain. "This is a lot," Jasper shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. He wasn't used to it, to being important to someone, to making a difference in another person's life. "It's nothing," he muttered, turning to put away the rest of the groceries. "Just the basics." Later, he found Sloane in the guest room he had assigned to the children. She had folded each piece of clothing with meticulous care, arranging them in perfectly aligned stacks on the dresser. The diapers were organized by size, the toiletries carefully arranged. Everything was set out as if they were precious treasures. Watching her through the half-open door, Jasper realized that to her they were indeed treasures. Gifts she was afraid of losing at any moment. The realization hit him hard. This child was used to losing everything she loved. Time passed, and slowly, the house transformed. The silence that once reigned supreme was replaced by a symphony of small sounds. Light footsteps in the hallway, the jingle of the rattle in Rowan's hands, the murmur of Sloane reading to her brother. Soft laughter when Jasper made a funny face at the baby. The smell of the house also changed. The aroma of old books and wood was joined by the scent of hot food, fresh bread, and newly washed clothes. Even the air seemed lighter, as if the house could finally breathe after years of being suffocated by silence. Jasper tried to keep his distance, convincing himself it was just a temporary arrangement, but each day made that lie harder to maintain. He found himself looking up recipes for foods Sloane might like, making sure the children's room was warm enough on cold nights, waking up in the middle of the night to check if Rowan was okay. And, most revealingly, he began to help with the daily care. At first, it was just small things, holding Rowan while Sloane took a bath, or helping serve the food. Then, without noticing when the transition happened, he was warming bottles in the middle of the night, changing diapers with a newfound skill, and tucking blankets around small, sleeping bodies. On one particularly quiet evening, he found himself sitting in the armchair in the children's room, watching Sloane fall asleep, clutching the storybook he had bought her. Rowan was already asleep in the makeshift crib he had set up, the colorful rattle held securely in his chubby little hand. The soft light from the lamp cast golden shadows across the room, creating a picture of domestic peace that Jasper had never imagined in his house. He felt something strange and warm grow in his chest, something he wasn't ready to name, but which he recognized as affection. He tried to push the feeling away, telling himself it was just compassion, just the basic human instinct to protect the helpless. But as he adjusted the blanket around Sloane's shoulders and gently removed the book from her sleeping fingers, he knew he was lying to himself. The truth, which he wasn't yet ready to admit, was that these two children, had become important to him. More important than anything had been in a very, very long time. 3 weeks had passed since the night of the storm. Rowan had completely recovered from the respiratory infection, his cheeks now full and rosy, his eyes bright and curious. He could sit up on his own, clapped his hands when he was excited, and smiled at Jasper every morning as if he had known him forever. Sloane had changed too. Her clean, properly fitting clothes replaced the old, oversized ones. Her hair, now well cared for, framed a face that no longer looked so tense and watchful. Gradually, she began to act like the 6-year-old she was, drawing, exploring the garden when the weather allowed, asking questions about everything. The transformation was visible not only in the children but also in the house. Colorful toys now shared space with the sober objects that had once dominated the environment. Sloane's drawings were taped to the refrigerator door. A high chair for Rowan occupied a permanent place at the kitchen table. And, most surprisingly, the transformation was visible in Jasper. The man who rarely smiled now found himself laughing at Rowan's antics or Sloane's unexpectedly profound observations. The man who valued his solitude above all else now felt the house was strangely empty when the children were asleep. On one particularly clear morning, Jasper was sitting in his office, looking out the window at the garden where the snow was beginning to melt. Sloane was playing outside, building what looked like a small snowman, while Rowan watched fascinated from his stroller. The scene was so peaceful, so perfectly domestic, that for a moment Jasper allowed himself to imagine it could continue like this, that these children could really stay with him, that they could become a family. The reality, however, hit him hard. What was he thinking? He wasn't a father, he never wanted to be. He knew nothing about raising children, and more importantly, what he was doing wasn't legal. 2 children living with a stranger without any documentation, without any formality. It was madness. Jasper ran a hand over his face, trying to organize his thoughts. The situation had gone too far. It was time to do the right thing, no matter how difficult it was. He picked up the phone and, after a few seconds of hesitation, dialed the number for social services that he had researched days before. Child Protective Services. "Good morning," a female voice answered on the other end of the line. "Good morning," Jasper replied, his voice more tense than he would have liked. I need to report a situation." "Yes, sir. What is it about?" Jasper took a deep breath, his eyes still fixed on the children playing in the garden. "I have 2 children under my care, a 6-year-old girl and a 10-month-old baby. He hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "Their mother passed away a few months ago. There are no other relatives that I know of." "I understand," the woman said, her tone becoming more professional. "And what is your relationship to these children, Mr. Blackwood, Jasper Blackwood? I am..." He hesitated again. What was he to Sloane and Rowan? "I'm just someone who is helping them temporarily. They showed up at my door during a snowstorm about 3 weeks ago." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, as if the operator was processing the information. "Mr. Blackwood, thank you for contacting us. It's important that situations like this are reported. We will need to send a social worker to assess the situation and determine the best course of action for these children." "Yes, I understand," Jasper said, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I just want to make sure they'll be okay, that they stay together." "We'll do our best, Mr. Blackwood, but I need to inform you that each case is evaluated individually. It depends heavily on the availability of foster homes that can accommodate siblings." And that's when Jasper heard it. A small, almost inaudible gasp. He turned quickly and saw, standing in the office doorway, Sloane. Her small face was as pale as paper, her wide eyes fixed on the phone in Jasper's hand. I have to go," he said abruptly. "I'll call back later to schedule this visit." He hung up without waiting for a response, guilt surging inside him as he saw the devastated expression on Sloane's face. How long had she been standing there? How much had she heard? "Sloane," he began, standing up slowly, as if approaching too quickly might scare her away. "I can explain." But Sloane took a step back, her small body as tense as a violin string about to snap. Her lips trembled slightly, and Jasper realized she was fighting back tears. "You're going to send us away," she said, Not a question, but a painful statement. That's not it, Jasper tried to explain, though he knew that, in a way, it was exactly that. I was just trying to do the right thing. You need a proper home with people who know how to take care of children, who can— If we leave, Sloane interrupted, her voice so shaky she could barely form the words, will they separate me from my brother? The question hit Jasper like a punch. The look on Sloane's face, pure fear mixed with a resignation that no child should ever know, made something inside him contract painfully. He wanted to say no, that of course they would stay together, that no one would ever separate them. But he couldn't lie to her, not about something so important. I don't know, Sloane, he admitted, feeling the weight of those words. I hope not, but it's not always possible to keep siblings together when— He couldn't finish. Sloane lowered her head, her small shoulders slumped in defeat. Without another word, she turned and left the office. Jasper heard her hurried footsteps down the hall, followed by the soft click of the bedroom door closing. Jasper sank back into his chair, his heart heavy. What had he done? All the trust Sloane had placed in him, all the security he had managed to give her and Rowan over the past few weeks, all shattered with a single phone call. But what else could he do? He couldn't just keep two children who weren't his. That's not how things worked. There were procedures, rules, laws. And, as much as it hurt to admit, maybe Sloane and Rowan really would be better off with a real family. People who knew what they were doing, who were prepared to raise children. Not like him, a lonely man who could barely handle his own emotions, let alone the emotional needs of two traumatized children. He spent the rest of the day trying to talk to Sloane, but she refused to leave the room except to care for Rowan. Even then, she avoided looking at Jasper, responding only in monosyllables when he tried to start a conversation. At night, when he went to check on the children before turning in, he found Sloane sitting on the bed, wide awake, watching Rowan sleep in the crib beside her. Her eyes were red but dry, as if she had cried until there were no tears left. You should sleep, Jasper said softly, standing at the door. It's late. It's okay, she replied, without looking at him. Good night, Jasper hesitated, wanting to say more, wanting to explain, to comfort, to promise that everything would be okay. But the words wouldn't come. With a sigh, he closed the door and went to his own room. He couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling for hours, Sloane's question echoing in his mind. Will they separate me from my brother? The pain in that small voice, the fear in her eyes, it all weighed on his chest like lead. When the first light of morning crept through the cracks in the curtain, Jasper was already up. He had made a decision, though he didn't know exactly what it was yet. All he knew was that he couldn't go on like this. He went down to the kitchen and started making breakfast, oatmeal for Rowan, pancakes for Sloane. It was her favorite, though she had never said so explicitly. Jasper had noticed it from the sparkle in her eyes whenever he made them. He was flipping the last pancake when he heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Sloane standing in the kitchen doorway, Rowan in her arms. Both were already dressed, and Jasper noticed with a pang in his heart that Sloane's small tattered backpack was slung over her shoulder. Good morning, he said, trying to sound casual. I made pancakes. Sloane nodded but didn't approach the table. Instead, she held Rowan a little tighter and lifted her chin in a gesture of courage that seemed to take all the effort in the world. The weather's better, she said, her voice resigned. We're leaving. We don't want to be a bother anymore. The words hit Jasper like a bolt of lightning. He was suddenly confronted with the reality he had been avoiding. The idea of Sloane and Rowan leaving his life, the house returning to its former silence, the children's room empty, the toys put away, no drawings on the fridge, no laughter echoing through the halls. The image was so painful that he was momentarily paralyzed, the spatula still in his hand, his heart beating painfully against his ribs. Leaving, he repeated, the word coming out as a whisper. Where would you go? Sloane shrugged, a gesture that seemed too heavy for her small shoulders. I don't know, she admitted. But we've bothered you enough. You want to call those people to take us away, so— No, Jasper interrupted, the word coming out stronger than he intended. He put the spatula on the counter and approached her, kneeling to be at her eye level. No, Sloane, I don't want you to leave. Confusion flickered across her face, briefly replacing the resignation. But I heard you on the phone. You were talking about us, about sending us away. Jasper sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration, not with her, but with himself. I was trying to do the right thing, he explained. Legally, I should have informed the authorities about you from the beginning. 2 children can't just live with a stranger without any kind of official process. But now you want us to leave, she insisted, her voice small. No, Jasper said, and this time there was certainty in his voice. I don't. In fact, I've realized I want the exact opposite. He hesitated, searching for the right words. How could he explain to a 6-year-old the whirlwind of emotions he was feeling? How could he say that in just 3 weeks, she and Rowan had become more important to him than anything had been in years? You're not going anywhere, he said finally, his voice softer than he expected. You can stay. Sloane's eyes widened, a mix of hope and suspicion warring on her face. Stay, she repeated, as if the word were hard to understand, like, live here with you? Yes, Jasper confirmed. If you want to, if you'll have me. But what about those people you called? Aren't they going to come and get us? Jasper shook his head. No, they're not. I'm going to call them again, but to say something different. I'm going to tell them I want to be your legal guardian, that I want to... He hesitated, the word still strange in his mind. That I want to adopt you. The word hung between them, huge and frightening in its implications. Adoption, family, permanent commitment. It was everything Jasper had avoided for years, hiding in his isolated mansion, building walls around his heart. And yet, looking at Sloane's face and at Rowan in her arms, he knew it was the only thing that made sense, the only thing he wanted. You want to be our dad? Sloane asked, her voice barely a whisper. The question, so simple and yet so complex, made something inside Jasper break and rebuild itself in the same instant. Yes, he answered, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. Yes, I want to be your dad, if you'll have me. For a long moment, Sloane just stared at him, as if trying to find any sign of deceit, any indication that she shouldn't believe him. Then, slowly, something on her face changed. The suspicion gave way to a hope so pure and intense it made Jasper's heart ache. Can we really stay? She asked, her voice choked with emotion. Forever. Forever, Jasper confirmed, and this time there was no hesitation at all. Sloane took a step forward, then another, until she was right in front of Jasper. With Rowan still secure in one arm, she reached out her free hand and, with surprising gentleness, touched his face, as if to make sure he was real. Thank you, she whispered. Jasper felt something warm and wet on his face, and realized, surprised, that he was crying. He couldn't remember the last time he had cried. Maybe never, since childhood. But now the tears came freely, and he made no effort to stop them. No, he said, covering her small hand with his. Thank you for finding me, for giving me a second chance. And there, in the sunlit kitchen, with the smell of pancakes in the air and the soft sound of Rowan's laughter filling the space between them, Jasper knew he had found what he didn't even know he was looking for, a family. The following weeks brought a routine Jasper had never imagined for his life. The days, once empty and predictable, now had a different rhythm, marked by small moments that, added together, created something new and unexpected. Mornings started early, much earlier than Jasper was used to. Rowan would wake with the sun, his happy babbles echoing through the baby monitor Jasper had installed in the children's room. It was usually Sloane who went to her brother first, but Jasper would soon join them, still sleepy but with a cup of coffee in hand, and a good morning that became more genuine with each passing day. Breakfasts turned into moments of conversation, mostly Sloane talking about her dreams or asking questions about the world, while Rowan happily banged on the tray of his high chair, trying to participate in his own way. Jasper would answer patiently, surprised at how easily the words came now, so different from the man of few words he had always been. During the mornings, while Rowan took his nap, Jasper would try to work in his office, answering emails, managing his investments, occasionally taking a video call. Sloane would usually stay nearby, drawing quietly, or flipping through the books he had bought for her. Sometimes, she would look up and catch him watching her, and the shy smile she gave in return would make something inside him warm. In the afternoon, if the weather allowed, they would go out into the garden. Jasper had bought a simple swing and installed it on a sturdy tree near the house. Sloane would swing for hours, her serious face breaking into smiles when she reached heights she considered impressive. Rowan would watch from a blanket spread on the grass, his eyes following his sister with fascination, small laughs escaping when she waved at him from up high. The evenings brought bath time, an adventure Jasper had learned to face with humor after the first few drenched disasters. Then came dinner, bedtime stories, and finally, the silence of the house once the children were asleep. It was in these moments of silence that Jasper allowed himself to think about how much his life had changed, how much he had changed. Rowan, who had arrived so fragile and sick, was now a healthy, cheerful baby. His full, rosy cheeks bore no resemblance to the feverish baby from the night of the storm. He crawled with determination across the living room carpet, explored every corner within his reach, and made increasingly complex sounds, as if he were just steps away from forming his first words. His smiles, generous and frequent, were like little gifts Jasper didn't know he needed to receive, and Sloane, the change in her was even more remarkable. The scared, distrustful girl from the first few days was gradually giving way to a child who was beginning to feel safe. Jasper caught her singing softly once, while she was meticulously arranging her clothes in the closet. It was a simple melody, a lullaby he didn't recognize, probably something her mother used to sing. Her voice was soft and sweet, and Jasper stood in the hallway, his heart aching, listening without wanting to interrupt that moment of peace. Jasper also noticed the changes in himself, small things at first, how he started smiling more, how his steps, once heavy and purposeful, became lighter around the house, how his mornings, once dedicated to long hours of solitary work, now included preparing breakfast for 3, helping dress a restless baby, and listening to Sloane's made-up stories. In moments of honesty with himself, Jasper recognized that something fundamental was changing within him. The wall he had built around his heart, brick by brick, year after year, was beginning to show cracks. And through those cracks, something he thought he had lost forever was finding its way back. The ability to care deeply for someone other than himself. It wasn't a change he had sought or planned. In fact, if someone had suggested just a few months earlier that he would open his home and his life to 2 children, Jasper would have laughed at the idea. He had chosen solitude. He had cultivated it like a precious garden. He had convinced himself it was better that way, and yet there he was, holding Rowan in his lap as the baby fell asleep against his chest, listening to Sloane read aloud, gently correcting her when she stumbled on a difficult word, assembling the puzzle he had bought for her, sitting on the living room floor, his back aching in a way that didn't really bother him. Every small gesture, every shared moment, every exchanged smile was like a pickaxe against the wall he had built. And though a part of him still resisted, another part, a part that grew with each passing day, was beginning to wonder how he had lived for so long that way, alone, closed off, cold. It was on one particularly quiet night that the weight of his decision truly hit him. He had put the children to bed as usual. He had read a story to Sloane, checked Rowan's temperature with the back of his hand, a gesture that had become automatic, even though he knew the baby was perfectly healthy now. He had said goodnight, closed the door, leaving just a crack open, and returned to the living room. Sitting in his armchair, with an open book in his lap that he couldn't really read, Jasper found himself thinking about the future, not just tomorrow or next week, but for years to come. He saw Rowan taking his first steps, saying his first words, going to school. He saw Sloane growing up, learning to ride a bike, making friends, having her first triumphs and disappointments. He saw himself growing old alongside them, being the anchor he never had as a child. And then, like a dark cloud covering the sun, came the fear. What if he couldn't keep them? What if social services decided he wasn't suitable? After all, what did he know about raising children? What qualifications did he have? other than a large house and financial resources. Would that be enough? The fear gripped him like an icy fist around his heart. For the first time in a long time, Jasper felt truly vulnerable. It wasn't just his comfort or his peace of mind at stake. It was the future of two children who, in some impossible-to-explain way, had become the center of his world. The thought of losing them was unbearable. Imagining the house returning to its former silence, the empty rooms, the lonely routine, all of it now seemed not just sad but wrong, as if the universe were being undone and reassembled incorrectly. Jasper closed the book, unable to continue pretending to read. He walked to the window and looked out at the night. The moon was high and bright, casting silver shadows across the garden. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird sang. He had to do something. He couldn't just wait and hope that everything would work out. He needed to take action to ensure that Sloane and Rowan could stay with him. Forever. The idea of forever, a commitment so permanent, so definitive, should have scared him. It was exactly the kind of thing the old Jasper would have avoided at all costs. Ties, responsibilities, hearts depending on his. But the Jasper who now watched the night, with the soft sound of the children's breathing coming through the monitor, felt no fear of that forever. Instead, he feared not being able to reach it. That night, before going to bed, Jasper made a decision. Tomorrow he would begin the official process. He would hire a lawyer specializing in adoption. He would fill out all the necessary forms. He would do all the interviews, all the home visits, all the required training. He would do whatever it took to turn the temporary arrangement into something permanent, to turn a house into a home, to turn 3 separate lives into one family. It would be difficult. It would be scary. It would be the biggest challenge he had ever faced. But as he listened to the soft breathing of the children through the monitor, Jasper knew it would be the most important challenge of his life. And for the first time in many years, he felt ready to fight for something bigger than himself. The rain fell gently outside, creating a soft rhythm against the mansion's windows. It was one of those perfect nights to stay home, protected and warm, while the world outside turned grey and wet. Jasper was in his office, reviewing some documents that the family lawyer had sent earlier, the first steps in the adoption process. Every form, every statement, every listed requirement made it all more real. It was no longer just an idea, a vague wish. It was there in paper and ink, the path to making Sloane and Rowan officially part of his family. The word still sounded strange in his mind. Family. Something he had lost so long ago and never imagined he would recover. The soft sound of footsteps in the hallway made him look up. Sloane appeared at the door, her hair slightly disheveled after her bath, wearing the blue pajamas with stars he had bought last week. In her arms, she carried Rowan, already in his sleep suit. "Jasper," she called, her small voice soft against the sound of the rain. "Can you help me give Rowan his bottle? He's fussy tonight." Jasper immediately put the papers aside and stood up. "Of course," he replied, feeling that now familiar wave of warmth in his chest whenever one of the children needed him. "Should we go to the living room? It's more comfortable." Sloane nodded, following him down the hall. In the living room, the low fire in the fireplace created a cozy atmosphere. Jasper sat on the large sofa, and Sloane settled beside him, adjusting Rowan in her small arms. "I think he's hungry," she said, trying to position the bottle. But Rowan fidgeted, restless, turning his face away. "Can I try?" Jasper offered, holding out his arms. Sloane carefully transferred the baby to him. Jasper settled him in his left arm, supporting his head in the crook of his elbow, as he had learned in recent weeks. With his right hand, he offered the bottle. Rowan looked at him with his big, curious eyes, then accepted the bottle's nipple and began to suck eagerly. "You're getting good at this," Sloane commented, watching the scene with a mixture of admiration and relief. Jasper smiled slightly. "I'm learning." They sat in silence for a few minutes, only the sound of the rain and the low flames filling the room. Rowan drank his milk contentedly, one of his little hands reaching up to touch Jasper's fingers, holding the bottle. The touch, so small, so trusting, hit Jasper like a wave. Suddenly, he was no longer just in the living room of his mansion. He was somewhere else, in another time. It was a hard, cold bench in a long hallway with faded institutional green walls. He was small, maybe 5 or 6, his legs dangling without reaching the floor. He wore clothes that weren't really his. They had belonged to other children before him, just as they would belong to others after. He was waiting. He had been waiting for hours. The social worker had said his mother would come to get him that day, that it was just a visit to see how she was doing, that if everything went well, maybe, just maybe, he could go home. But the hours passed, the sun shifted its position in the high windows, and no one came. Other children walked by, some looking at him with curiosity, others with an indifference learned from experience. They all knew what he had not yet accepted. His mother wasn't coming, not that day, not ever again. The rejection hurt like a physical wound, an empty space inside his chest that nothing seemed to fill. The feeling of not belonging to anyone, of being disposable, replaceable, was like a slow poison spreading through his childish blood. The weeks turned into months, the months, years. The boy who waited on the bench became the boy who no longer waited, who built walls around his heart, who learned it was safer not to care, until one day a different couple showed up. They didn't promise the world, didn't make grand declarations, they just offered a home, patience, consistency, and, over time, something he had given up on believing he deserved: love. It wasn't easy. There were moments of resistance, of fear, of certainty that, like everyone else, they too would abandon him. But they stayed, day after day. They stayed, through the nightmares, the angry outbursts, the walls he tried to keep up. They stayed until he slowly began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could belong to someone. Jasper. Sloane's voice brought him back to the present. "Are you okay? You have a strange look on your face." Jasper blinked, realizing his eyes were moist. Rowan had finished the bottle and was now watching him with curiosity, his little hand still holding his finger. "I'm fine," he answered, his voice a little hoarse. "Just thinking." "About what?" Sloane asked, leaning closer. Jasper hesitated. He wasn't used to talking about his past. He had spent so much time burying those memories that he had almost forgotten them. Almost. "When I was little," he began, surprised by his own willingness to share. "Not much older than you, I was in an orphanage for a while." "My mother, she couldn't take care of me." Sloane's eyes widened. "Like us." Jasper nodded. "In a way, yes. I was alone. It was hard." "Were you scared?" she asked, her voice so low it was almost lost in the sound of the rain. "Very," Jasper admitted. "I was afraid I'd never have a home again, that I wouldn't belong anywhere, that I wasn't important to anyone." Sloane processed the information in silence, her small, serious face focused on his words. "And then?" she finally asked. "What happened?" "Then," Jasper continued, shifting Rowan to rest on his shoulder, patting his back gently, "I found people who cared about me, who showed me that I deserved a home too. A couple adopted me and became my parents. Were they nice to you?" "Very. They taught me what it was like to be loved, to be part of a family." "And where are they now?" Jasper felt a familiar tightness in his chest. "They passed away a few years ago." "They were older when they adopted me." Sloane nodded, with the surprising understanding of a child who had already known loss. "Is that why you live alone?" she asked. "Or used to?" The simplicity of the question, the clarity with which she saw the situation, caught Jasper off guard. Yes, maybe that was why. Maybe after losing his family, he had decided, consciously or not, that it was safer to be alone, that if he didn't allow himself to love again, he wouldn't have to feel the pain of losing. He looked at Rowan, now sleepy on his shoulder, and at Sloane watching him with her big, attentive eyes. 2 children that fate had placed on his doorstep on a stormy night. 2 children who, without him realizing it, had reopened that part of his heart he thought he had closed forever. "Yes," he replied finally. "I think that's why I lived alone. But I don't anymore, do I?" A small smile lit up Sloane's face. "No. Now you have us." The simplicity of the statement made something inside Jasper release and reorder itself. Looking at the 2 children, he finally accepted the truth his heart already knew. He didn't want to live without them anymore. He couldn't. Somehow, in such a short time, they had become as essential to him as the air he breathed. "Yes," he agreed, his voice firm and clear. "Now I have you." And for the first time in a very long time, he felt truly at home. The call came on a Monday morning. Jasper was in the kitchen, making coffee while Sloane helped Rowan eat bits of banana in his high chair. The phone rang, and when Jasper answered, the voice on the other end was professional and direct. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Diana Reynolds from the Department of Social Services. We'd like to schedule a visit to assess your situation with the children. Would Thursday at 10 a.m. be possible?" Jasper's heart skipped a beat. He knew this moment would come. After all, he had started the process himself. But the reality of the visit, so close, made his stomach tighten. "Thursday at 10 is perfect," he replied, keeping his voice steady. When he hung up, he found Sloane looking at him, her eyes big and attentive. Even after all these months, it still impressed him how she noticed everything. "Who was that?" she asked, wiping a bit of banana from Rowan's chin. "That was Social Services," Jasper explained, sitting down at the table. "They're coming here on Thursday to meet us, to see how you're doing." Sloane was quiet for a moment, absorbing the information. Jasper could almost see the thoughts spinning behind those worried eyes. "Is it to decide if we can stay with you?" she finally asked, her voice small. "It's part of the process," Jasper confirmed, "but don't worry, everything will be fine." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. Jasper cleaned the house from top to bottom, organized the rooms, stocked the pantry. He reviewed documents, prepared for potential questions, and even searched the internet for what to expect from a social services visit. At some point, he realized he was acting like a nervous teenager before a first date, and almost laughed at himself. The night before the visit, after putting the children to bed, Jasper sat in the living room with a cup of tea that grew cold, forgotten, in his hands. The anxiety he felt surprised him. He, who had always been so controlled, so self-assured in negotiations involving millions, now felt completely vulnerable at the prospect of losing the two little people who had turned his life upside down. What if the social worker thought he wasn't suitable? What if his lack of experience with children counted against him? What if the isolated mansion was considered an inappropriate environment for growing children? The doubts multiplied in his mind like weeds. "Jasper." The soft voice startled him. Sloane was standing in the living room doorway, barefoot, her oversized pajamas slipping off her small shoulders. "Hey," he said, composing himself. "Shouldn't you be asleep?" She came closer, climbing onto the sofa next to him. "I can't sleep," she admitted. "I'm thinking about the woman who's coming tomorrow." "Me too," Jasper confessed, "but it's going to be okay." "What if she doesn't let us stay?" The question, so direct, so laden with fear, was the exact one echoing in his own mind. Jasper hesitated, torn between protecting her with a comforting lie or offering the honesty she deserved. "I'll do everything I can to make sure you stay," he said finally. "I promise." Sloane nodded slowly, accepting his answer. Then, to Jasper's surprise, she reached out her small hand and took his. "Me too," she said simply. It was in that moment that Jasper realized he wasn't alone in this battle. Maybe he would never be alone again. Thursday dawned clear and cool. Jasper woke before his alarm, took a long shower, and dressed with care, opting for a navy sweater and dark pants, avoiding the suit that might seem too formal. He wanted to look professional, yet approachable, trustworthy. When he went down to the kitchen, he found Sloane already up, helping Rowan with breakfast. She had dressed her brother in the yellow onesie Jasper had bought the previous week and had combed her own hair with unusual care for a 6-year-old. "You look nice," Jasper commented, noticing the simple green dress she had chosen. Sloane shrugged, but a small smile appeared on her lips. "I want her to like us," she admitted. The comment tugged at Jasper's heart. He had been so focused on his own anxiety that he hadn't fully realized the weight Sloane was carrying. For her, this visit wasn't just a formality. It was, once again, her future and her brother's future in the hands of unknown adults. "Sloane," he said, kneeling to be at her level, "no matter what happens today, know that you and Rowan are perfect, just the way you are. No one needs to judge that." She looked at him for a long time, as if assessing the sincerity of his words. Then she nodded, an understanding beyond her years crossing her face. At 9:58 a.m., the doorbell rang. Jasper took a deep breath, exchanged one last encouraging look with Sloane, and went to answer the door. Diana Reynolds was a middle-aged woman with short brown hair and intelligent eyes behind red-framed glasses. She carried a folder and had a professional but genuine smile. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm Diana Reynolds from Social Services. Thank you for having me." "Please, come in," Jasper replied, opening the door wider. "And you can call me Jasper." As the social worker stepped into the hall, Jasper felt something small and warm slip into his hand. He looked down and saw Sloane beside him, holding his hand with a confidence that surprised him. The gesture filled him with a strength he didn't know he needed. "This is Sloane," he introduced, gently squeezing the girl's hand. "And that over there is Rowan." The baby was sitting on the living room rug, playing intently with colorful blocks, oblivious to the importance of the moment. "Hello, Sloane," Diana said, bending down slightly. "It's a pleasure to meet you." "Hi," Sloane replied, her voice small but firm. "Did you come to see if we can stay with Jasper?" The frankness of the question took both Jasper and the social worker by surprise. Diana recovered quickly, smiling kindly. "I'm here to get to know you better and see how you're adjusting," she explained. "May I ask you some questions?" The next 2 hours were intense. Diana walked through the house, taking notes, asking questions, observing the interaction between Jasper and the children. She asked about routines, nutrition, educational plans. She wanted to know about Jasper's support network, his finances, how he would handle emergencies. Jasper answered everything honestly, without trying to hide his limitations or insecurities. Yes, he was new to this. Yes, he was still learning, but he was committed, completely committed. Eventually, when Sloane took Rowan to his room for his morning nap, Diana sat down with Jasper in the living room for a more direct conversation. "So," she began, adjusting her glasses, "you really want to go through with this? Adopting 2 children is a huge responsibility for someone with no prior parenting experience." Jasper looked directly into her eyes. All the hesitation from the previous days evaporated. "I want to be their legal guardian," he affirmed, his voice firm and clear. "I know it seems sudden and maybe even irrational. 4 months ago I lived alone, convinced I preferred it that way. But these children," he paused, searching for the right words, "they didn't just enter my house. They entered my life, my heart. And I know with absolute certainty that I want to give them what they deserve: a permanent home, security, and someone who loves them unconditionally." Diana watched him for a long moment, her professional face revealing little. Then, to Jasper's surprise, she smiled. "You know," she said, closing her folder, "in this job, we see a lot of difficult situations. Children moving from one home to another, never really finding stability. When we started this case, I confess I was skeptical. A single man, no experience with children, suddenly wanting to adopt. It seemed unusual." Jasper nodded, understanding her hesitation. "But," she continued, "what I saw today was something rare. I saw a genuine bond. Not just your commitment to them, but theirs to you. The way little Sloane took your hand when she saw me, that's not something you can fake." Jasper felt a lump in his throat. "So, there's still a road ahead," Diana explained, standing up. "Assessments, interviews, background checks. But I promise to move the process forward. And based on what I saw today, I will be recommending that the children remain in your care while the process moves forward." The relief Jasper felt was so intense that for a moment he feared his legs might give out. But he stood firm, extending his hand to the social worker. "Thank you," he said simply, knowing that no words could adequately express his gratitude. Diana smiled, shaking his hand. "Don't thank me yet. The real journey is just beginning." The following weeks were filled with paperwork, interviews, and visits. Jasper rearranged his professional life to be more present at home. He hired a private tutor to begin Sloane's formal education, enrolled her in swimming lessons in the nearby town, and researched best practices for child development. Then, on an ordinary Thursday, the envelope arrived. Jasper immediately recognized the official seal of the Department of Social Services. With slightly trembling fingers, he opened it. The letter was direct. His petition for adoption had been approved. Sloane and Rowan were now, legally and officially, his children. Jasper sat down, the letter still in his hands, feeling a wave of emotion so intense he could barely breathe. It was a joy unlike anything he had ever felt, new, clean, without reservations or conditions. "Jasper," Sloane's voice brought him back to the present. She was standing in the doorway, watching him with curiosity. "Is everything okay?" He looked at her, his daughter, and smiled. "Everything is perfect," he replied, showing her the letter. The confirmation just arrived. The adoption was approved. "Officially, we are a family now." Sloane's eyes widened, processing the information. Then slowly, a smile lit up her face. "Forever?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Forever," Jasper confirmed. Sloane ran to him and hugged him with all the strength of her small arms. Jasper wrapped his arms around her, feeling complete in a way he had never imagined possible. A few afternoons later, the reality of his new life still surprised him in small moments of crystal clarity. He was in the living room, answering emails on his laptop, while Sloane drew at the coffee table. Rowan was on the nearby rug, playing with his colorful blocks. The baby, now almost 13 months old, was more active and curious every day. Lately, he had started to babble more, experimenting with sounds that made sense to no one but himself. Jasper would occasionally look up from his work to watch the children, a sense of peace settling in his chest. It was a quiet, ordinary afternoon, perfect in its simplicity. That's when it happened. Rowan, sitting on the rug, suddenly dropped the block he was holding. He looked directly at Jasper, raised his chubby arms towards him, and said with surprising clarity, "Da, da." Jasper froze, the email he was typing completely forgotten. Sloane stopped drawing too, her pencil suspended in mid-air, her eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jasper nodded, unable to speak. Slowly, he closed his laptop and slid to the floor, kneeling a few feet from Rowan. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, holding out his hands. "Want to come here?" Rowan smiled, revealing his few teeth, and clapped his hands. Then, to the utter astonishment of Jasper and Sloane, he propped himself up on his hands and knees and began to move. It wasn't just a random movement. It was a determined crawl, straight toward Jasper's outstretched hands. "He's crawling," Sloane exclaimed, kneeling beside Jasper. "Look, he's coming to you." In a few seconds that seemed to stretch on infinitely, Rowan reached Jasper's hands. The baby looked up straight into his eyes and repeated, "Da-da." Jasper picked him up, feeling the warm, solid little body against his chest. He looked at Sloane, whose eyes were filled with unshed tears, a radiant smile illuminating her face. "He called you Dad," she said, her voice overflowing with joy. "He knows who you are." Jasper hugged Rowan tightly, wrapping Sloane with his other arm, forming a perfect circle of the three of them. He felt a tear run down his face but made no move to hide it. Holding his children, Jasper knew, with absolute certainty, that he would never again be the same cold man he once was. The transformation that had begun on a stormy night, with a desperate knock on his door, was complete. The wall around his heart had not just crumbled. In its place grew something new and strong, something he would never trade for the safety of his old solitude. A family. Spring had arrived in full force. After months of snow and grey days, the sun was finally shining in an almost impossibly blue sky. The trees displayed their first green buds, and colourful flowers began to dot the beds of the local park. It was Saturday, and Jasper had decided it was a perfect day for an outing. So after breakfast, he prepared a small basket with snacks, filled water bottles, gathered hats and sunscreen, and settled Rowan into the new stroller he had bought the week before. "How about the park?" he asked Sloane, whose eyes widened at the suggestion. "The big park with the lake and the swings?" she questioned, already running to get her favorite sneakers. "That's the one," Jasper confirmed, smiling at her enthusiasm. The park was only a 15-minute drive away. During the ride, Sloane looked out the window with fascination, pointing at houses, trees, and people passing by. Rowan, secure in his car seat, babbled happily as if trying to join the conversation. Jasper watched them in the rearview mirror, feeling that now familiar wave of affection that washed over him at the most unexpected moments. It still surprised him how his life had completely changed in such a short time. 6 months ago, he would have made this same drive alone, barely noticing the scenery, his mind occupied with business, deadlines, and numbers. Now he saw the world through the eyes of Sloane and Rowan, full of colors, possibilities, and small wonders. The park was relatively quiet that morning. A few families were scattered across the wide lawn, children running and laughing on the swings, elderly couples walking calmly along the paved paths. Jasper found a perfect spot under the generous shade of an old oak tree, close enough to the playground for him to supervise Sloane, but with enough privacy for them to enjoy the day in peace. He spread a colorful blanket on the grass and set up their little base. Rowan, who had dozed off during the ride, continued to sleep peacefully in the stroller. His face relaxed, his small lips occasionally forming enigmatic smiles from his baby dreams. "Can I go on the swing?" Sloane asked, already bouncing with anticipation. "Of course," Jasper replied. "Stay where I can see you, okay?" Sloane nodded solemnly, understanding the responsibility in the request, and ran off toward the playground. Jasper watched her, amazed at the transformation that had also occurred in her. The frightened, distrustful girl from the night of the storm was increasingly giving way to a child who laughed, ran, and played like any other her age. There were still moments of insecurity, occasional nightmares, difficult questions about the past, but there was also an admirable resilience, a capacity to love and trust again that moved him deeply. Sitting on the blanket, with Rowan sleeping peacefully beside him, Jasper watched Sloane run across the lawn, now chasing a yellow butterfly. The sunlight filtering through the tree's leaves created dancing patterns of light and shadow on them. A gentle breeze brought the scent of freshly bloomed flowers. Somewhere nearby, birds sang cheerfully, and in that moment, he felt a peace he had never known before. It wasn't just the absence of worry or pain, it was something deeper, more complete. A sense of belonging, of being exactly where he was supposed to be, with exactly who he was supposed to be with. Rowan stirred in the stroller, slowly opening his eyes. Jasper leaned over to adjust the light blanket around him, receiving in return one of those unreserved smiles that only babies can give. Pure joy, without expectations or conditions. In the distance, Sloane waved energetically before running to the swings, where she joined a few children her age. Jasper smiled as he saw her shyly introduce herself to a girl with colorful braids. Small steps, small victories. After nearly an hour of playing, Sloane returned to the blanket, her cheeks flushed from the exercise, her eyes bright with excitement. She sat down next to Jasper, accepting the water bottle he offered. "I had so much fun," she said, after taking long sips. "Thanks for bringing us here." "Anytime you want," Jasper replied, gently stroking her hair. "Are you hungry? I brought sandwiches and fruit." Sloane nodded, but before reaching for the picnic basket, she pulled something from the pocket of her dress. It was a piece of paper, carefully folded into 4. "I made this for you," she said, handing him the paper with a mix of pride and shyness. "Yesterday, when you were working." Jasper took the paper curiously. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a colorful drawing made with crayons. There were 3 figures holding hands, a tall one representing him, a smaller one in a dress representing Sloane, and a tiny one that could only be Rowan. Behind them was a large house with many windows and a tree beside it. A yellow sun shone in the corner of the paper, with a big smile drawn in its center. And at the bottom of the page, in large but slightly crooked letters, was written, "Our family." Something tightened in Jasper's chest, an emotion so intense it left him speechless for a moment. He looked at the drawing, at the smiling faces Sloane had drawn with such care, at those 2 simple words that meant everything. He looked up to find Sloane watching him expectantly, waiting for his reaction. Rowan, now wide awake, babbled happily in the stroller, clapping his hands as if he also approved of the drawing. "Do you like it?" Sloane asked, uncertainty tinging her voice. Jasper held the drawing with one hand and reached out with the other to hold Sloane's. "Thank you for coming into my life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My heart was cold. I was closed off, used to being alone. You gave me what I needed most, love. I am a better person because of you." Sloane smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. For the first time, Jasper was certain he had found his home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones.